from the actual act. The MEC must also consult, and once all the time has lapsed for the comments to be received, the MEC then must consider the route report, the environmental report, and the comments that have been received. Then the Act then says the MEC has two options. The one thing is to determine the route based on considerations of the aforesaid reports as well as the written comments. The other option is if there are issues that are raised and the MEC deems that they need to be referred to a commission then is constituted and it will then address those particular issues. So in other words, if Mr. Smith somewhere submits or Mrs. Smith submits the project is not able to respond or deal with, it's escalated to the MEC. The MEC may then decide to escalate it to a commission. So that person, that Mr. or Mrs. Smith, would then be invited to such a commission to articulate or ventilate that particular issue. And then that commission then also then compiles a report, which is submitted to the MEC, and then the MEC then considers that as supplementary information, upon which he may then decide to publish the route. So part of this then is the MEC consulting other MECs, the MEC for planning, because ultimately a project of this nature doesn't happen in a vacuum. It has to align with the strategic planning of the government. In this case, it's the Gauteng government. So after having determined the route, and by the way, you will see that it speaks about provincial road or railway line. So this process and this act applies to whether the government is intending on building a provincial road or a provincial railway line. So now this speaks about the publication. I know I touched on it earlier, but in terms of the Act, it speaks about then publishing a notice in the Provincial Gazette where there's a sketch plan, notification for the, so then B then also becomes important. So 611B is the process through which most of you then submitted through the official project email between 25 May to date. Of course, we note that because of this process is not widely known, we're not going to not respond to comments that come after. So we intend to continue the communication with yourselves as important stakeholders as the process unfolds. So by way of a diagram, it just summarizes what I've just articulated. MEC initiates the process of route determination. A technical study of possible routes is undertaken. A route is done on those routes. Stakeholder engagement begins, starting with authorities, bulk infrastructure service providers, etc. And then there's the publication of a notice. So this is the public participation process, the 30-day process. The MEC considers comments. MEC determines the route or appoints a commission. If he or she opts to appoint a commission, then the issues that are referred to commission are made public, and then people who raise them then are invited to come and ventilate further on those issues. There's a public inquiry in terms of the commission. Then the MEC would receive a report, consider them, and then be empowered to, it says finalize the route, but it's actually determine the route, and then the route is published in the Gazette. In terms of how we undertook this process for phase one, we initiated this process as far back as 2018, where the route alignment options in July 2019, we did environmental investigation, and then we commenced with the stakeholder July. And the reason why it was this long, you'll notice that that's when the onset of COVID came in, early 2021. So it took some of the government departments, people would not be available, et cetera, et cetera. We then commenced with the public participation process between July and August. We received submissions, where each is responded to. And if you go to the reports, which are, by the way, are on our website, on the GMA website, maybe we can share that link as well. You will see that what comments were submitted, what was the response, etc. And then between August and November, the MEC then was considering those inputs. And with everything else, he then determined the route on 25 May. And I think that's why we are here today. This is just a list of the stakeholders that were consulted prior to the public participation process. And then this is how we then undertook the public participation process. Just as a reminder, so in terms of the Act, it speaks about placing a notice in the Gazette. But we are aware that as people who have to apply the Act, not everybody is aware of where the Gazette, what is it published, etc. We then undertook to further publish this notice in 5 newspapers, just to supplement the legal requirement. There was a Sowetan on the 9th of July, the Star, the Beeld, Randburg Sun, Sandton Chronicle. And then we also then had it on the GMA website, and with the social media handle or tools that we have at our disposal, we would push messages just to try and the awareness in and around the issue. So some of the submissions, for instance, were people who were requesting copies of the documentation, which would make available on the memory stick. And of course, now we're in step 5, where we've received or invited and we're receiving submissions in and around. Although the Act speaks about requesting reasons why the MEC made the decision, as I was saying, as part of ensuring that all our stakeholders are aware of the process, we are embarking on responding to every single submission that has been received. So this is what most of you would have seen then, either in the Gazette or the newspapers that I've alluded to. So when the Act speaks. The Gauteng ones, ma'am. Sorry, I didn't. So I should have. So it would have been the Gauteng Twitter feed. Yes. Yeah. So this is what would have been then what then you would have seen on the 25th of May, the determined route. So what this sketch plan shows, in the green line, is the center line of this determined route. In the dotted lines on either side, it's just an indication what the extent of this 400-meter wide corridor that I alluded to in the beginning. So it is within this corridor that the future railway line and constructed, etc., depending on how the project develops. Now, the reason why it's 400 meters wide is in terms of a provincial road or a provincial railway line, because of the speeds. So let's talk about the road. Because of this, a provincial road is at least 100 kilometers up to 120. So in terms of the geometry, in terms of your curves, etc., you need a wider space to design that road. But it doesn't mean that the future railway reserve will be 400 meters wide. So this is just the space within which it will be designed. Sorry, just need this. So moving on then to what is section 7, it speaks about the regulations now that apply. So now that a route has been determined, the implication is that, as I think I'd mentioned earlier, that should a local municipality within which this determined road fall under receive an application for a land use change, can be establishment of a township, subdivision of land, I've mentioned the land use change, or any authorizations contemplated in the environment, in the ECA and the NEMA. So these are the legislation that apply to the environmental management. That application must be then forwarded to the MEC, who must then be afforded an opportunity to comment. Just to emphasize, the MEC does not reject or approve. He or she will just copy the application. It's for them to make that determination in terms of the outcome. So the rest of the subsections just deal with, what the level of information that the MEC would require, the feasibility of amending the route, should the application be approved, additional costs, etc. And then again, this is just a detail of the information. So it's not different to what the local authority would require from the person who's applying for the land use change. And then, of course, this is the part where the MEC then may comment in writing on that application. And then it just says the local authority mustn't then grant the application without consideration of the comments submitted by the MEC. And then after the authority has made its decision, that authority must then inform the MEC in terms of the outcome of that application. Last but not least, once a route has been determined, no service provider may lay, construct, alter, add any pipeline, electricity line, cable, telephone line, or cable, or any other structure over, under the areas described in section 8.1, which is determined route, unless permission has been obtained from the MEC. Now, when it speaks about, so in practical terms, if I may make the example of the actual current Gauteng system, we actually have a desk or a or sub-department that manages what we refer to as GTIA applications. So there are people who will apply to jack a pipe across the current Gauteng system or erect a billboard or whatever the case is. The same act applies. So an application is received, it will be considered by that office, and that's the context of this. So it's not stopping you as a private homeowner from modifying your house, or whatever, those minor works. This is speaking to bulk infrastructure.
You can drive train through my house. It doesn't.
Okay, we're not there yet. We're not there. Yes, sir. We're still not there. But I take the point. I take the point.
That's what you're talking to, yes. Not putting a sound.
No, sure. Moving on. So once a route has been determined, remember it's a 400-meter wide corridor that the future rail line will be designed, etc. Section 8 then is the second step in the process, and it's referred to as preliminary design. It provides a preliminary design of the future railway line within this 400-meter wide land corridor. It enables the identification of properties that are directly or indirectly affected by the future railway line. The process is carried out with extensive consultation and due regard to the interests of registered owners, holders of registered rights, municipalities, service providers, and the environment in respect of the properties that are directly or indirectly affected. It includes a full environmental impact assessment. So this is one of these are two fundamental differences between step 1, which is route determination, and step 2, which is preliminary design. In preliminary design is when we actually have a design. And from that design, we are able to identify exactly which properties are affected directly or indirectly. And that also includes a full EIA environmental impact assessment, which, of course, as per the legislation that applies, also has its own public participation process. So as you may be aware, so there's the consultation that happens in terms of the GTIA, and then there's the consultation that has to happen in terms of NEMA, the Environmental Management Act, in and around that EIA that will be done for that preliminary design. Once completed, it provides a basis upon which proclamation, expropriation, and procurement may occur, or may happen, rather, and provides more certainty on the possible location of the future rail reserve. So once the preliminary design process has been concluded, or undertaken and concluded, once route determination has happened, which is what happened on the 25th of May, the MEC may cause then the design of the preliminary design of the future railway line. This design may deviate from the route published, provided only one boundary falls outside the determined route. If that preliminary design deviates outside of the determined route, the route determination process actually has to be restarted. So this is the act. And then This permit design process must be carried out with due regard to and in respect of properties which will be directly affected by this design, the interests of the registered owners, holders of registered rights in respect thereof. In respect of the properties that will be indirectly affected, the accesses to and from such properties must be considered. Existing or future services must be considered. Interests of registered owners and holders of registered rights in respect to, it must also be considered as part of this process. So, in terms of practically what then happens, a draft permit design and the written report are prepared, and an EIA is conducted on this draft design. The MEC then must take steps as prescribed to notify interested persons of this draft design, this report, his or her intent to decide on the permit design, the regulatory measures will take effect on the publication of such a design, and the opportunity to submit comments with regard to the draft permit design. I think, again, just to emphasize, the reason why it is a draft, because it cannot be taken forward or finalized without having received input from all interested and affected parties. So once then that process of consultation has taken place, the MEC then considers the draft design, the environmental report, and the comments received from interested and affected parties, and may then accept the permit design for implementation with such amendments as the MEC deems necessary. So what this is referring to is that it's not the MEC making a decision on a whim, it's him or her considering the inputs from all interested and affected parties prior to making the decision. So I know this is not very legible because of the colors, but so this is just, it's a graphical representation of the EIA that I referred to say, when there's a draft preliminary design, it has to be taken then through the EIA process, which includes specialist studies. As an example, a lot of the submissions that we're receiving about Sharon Lee, and we're learning a lot about Sharon Lee, is the historic nature of some of the landmarks that exist. And those then are subject to what is called a heritage impact assessment. So an HIA, or heritage impact assessment, is a sub-study which then forms part of the overall environmental impact assessment. So once the preliminary or the draft preliminary design, the environmental impact assessment report have gone through the public participation process, the MEC then must thereafter, for general information, publish in the Gazette his or her acceptance of the design. In this advert, there will be an address where the design is available for inspection, information to indicate the direction of the alignment. Section C, when it speaks about Section 7, cease to apply. You'll recall in the first step, the determined route is 400 meters wide. The preliminary design may come back and be, as an example, 80 meters wide. So what that means is that what was determined to be 400 meters wide as a determined route, now the other 120 falls away, or 320 meters rather falls away. Only the extent of that preliminary design then will be subjected to regulations in and around issues of land, where the MEC must comment on land use change applications, etc. A preliminary design or sections thereof may be amended by the MEC, but should the MEC opt to amend, they have to repeat the preliminary design process. And then the power of the MEC may be exercised on written application by anyone who desires that such a design be amended. So what this means is that once a preliminary design has gone through the process, consultation, EIA, etc., and the MEC decides to publish that preliminary design or accept it, will receive written applications by anyone who desires that such a design be amended. Now, a practical example of this is the current Gauteng system, where one of our stations was actually shifted horizontally because a developer who understood the value of having a station as an anchor for the development of the township. So they then, and as a result, that station then was was shifted slightly, without compromising the system, without compromising the intent of the Gauteng, but also to benefit the greater community in and around economic development and investment. Last but not least, on publication of the preliminary design, so the Act actually, this part, to say the rules for route determination then fall away. Quickly, just in terms of the regulations or requirements that happen once a preliminary design has been accepted by the MEC, is again similar to route determination. The MEC must be afforded an opportunity to comment on any land use changes that will occur within that extent of the preliminary design. Where the Act speaks about Section 46, 48, 49, it's what I referred to earlier to say at the GMA as we speak, we've got an office that manages GTI applications where people want to construct or erect structures above, below, or in the rail reserve. And then, again, after the publication, the issue of bulk infrastructure, to say the MEC must then afford permission for ESCOM or REND water, but bulk infrastructure service providers, it's actually speaking about bulk infrastructure service providers. So that is then preliminary design. So we've gone from route determination, we've gone through preliminary design, and then if and when the preliminary design has been accepted, the next step then would be the proclamation. Again, it's legislated by the GTIA, specifically Section 11. So proclamation then provides further certainty in terms of the extent of the rail reserve, and thus the properties that will be directly or indirectly affected. As mentioned, it follows route determination and preliminary design, and owners and occupiers of land that will be affected, as well as interested and affected parties, are notified and are afforded a further opportunity to make further comments or representations. So this is very important to say, although the route, for instance, was determined on the 25th of May, we are continuing with engagement, and that's why I was saying that even though the Act says 30 days, we will similarly, even though preliminary design would have had its own stakeholder engagement process prior to the MEC making his or her decision, even in the next step, a proclamation. Proclamation actually is where it will get to a point where, sorry to use Mr. Smith, I apologize to Mr. Smith in the house, but if a Mr. Smith's house, or property rather, is identified, Mr. Smith will actually receive a letter. So we no longer, so now it's specific because at proclamation stage, we now know exactly which properties are directly or indirectly affected. Of course, then the proclamation then provides a basis for expropriation or land or rights over land. So there are instances where expropriation is not necessarily expropriating the full property. It can be rights or what's called a servitude or whatever. So in other words, the property may remain as is, but maybe during construction, with some agreement with the owner of the property, you may grant us access, to just maybe go through your gate or whatever the case is, to do what we need to do and get out. That's the part about rights over land. And of course then, because at proclamation stage, we're at the detail where each and every single earth number that is affected is known. We can then confirm what the future rail reserve will become. So in terms of then the requirements legally of proclamation, the MEC may by notice in the Gazette after investigation and report by the department and subject to Section 15. I'll get to Section 15 just now. Okay, is that the one? Okay, yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Thank you.
So just go back one slide. So if my property is now affected and I get the notice that there's going to be expropriation or whatever, and you say there that I can make a comment or representation, what's the chances that anything will be done about it? Zero. Historically.
Okay. It's okay.
Those collate to else we just can't say if there's the
Come again? Sir? No. I'm having a conversation about something else. No. I apologize. It had nothing to do with. I was trying to keep him from. I was trying to finish, then he can go. Sorry about that. So we'll get to section 15 just now. So what section 11 just says, then the MEC must by notice gazette the road or railway, provincial railway line that would have been proclaimed as the process has been articulated. Of course, other issues, if it exists already, etc. In terms of section 11.8, where a road or railway line is proclaimed over land, the rights to precious metals, precious stones, base metals, natural oil, the person, including the state in whom they vested prior to the state of proclamation. So if you as a property owner own rights to minerals that are underneath your property. Okay. I'm going to speed it up. Okay. Yes, sir. I'll get there.
Let's finish the presentation, and we will get to the Q&A session. Then I'm finished. Every comment is delaying this process.
You could have answered the question if you could.
There's a Q&A session dedicated for this. Let him conclude the presentation, and we will get to it, I promise you. All the questions will be noted.
Okay. All right. So section 15, I think that's the one. And I apologize for taking a long way to get here, but I thought I'd give context to the overall process. So in terms of section 15, before the MEC takes any action listed in subsection 3, which we'll get to, the MEC must notify the owners, occupiers of land that will be affected, interested and affected parties, as prescribed in writing or publication, in terms of the nature and purpose of the proposed action. So what this is saying is when the MEC then has decided, after route determination, after preliminary design, and proclamation, and to proclaim land that will be part of the future rail reserve. They have to then, I'll get to what the prescribed manner is, afford persons 21 days to make comments, take any other steps as may be prescribed, and otherwise comply with the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. The MEC then must give due consideration to any comments or before deciding to proceed with the action. In this case, it will be proclamation. In terms of then what subsection 3 speaks about, in terms of actions, and I'll just stick to what is relevant to today, is proclaiming a provincial road or railway line. Where the MEC proclaims a railway line, which is the context that we are here, within 60 days, the MEC must inform the owners or owners of the land affected by the proclamations by means of a notice served on the owner by hand or registered mail. Now, so that is proclamation. In the event where the process then gets to a point where there is indeed land that is identified for expropriation, Section 19 then applies. So this is the fourth step in the process where the land that will be affected, or owners of the land will be affected are notified following route determination, preliminary design, and proclamation. The MEC must pay in the event where the owner has not already been paid for the same process of expropriation, surveying and transfer costs, compensation as may be mutually agreed upon, based on the amount the property would have realized if sold on the date of expropriation on buyer, and an amount to make good any actual financial loss caused by the expropriation. The owner remains responsible for the rates, taxes, and maintenance. So what this is saying is that if after expropriation, by agreement, the owner remains in the property, although the compensation would have taken place because they are still occupying the property, they remain responsible for the rates and taxes and maintenance. The MEC then takes occupation of the properties on a date that is again agreed upon by the parties. The MEC may by notice the owner expropriate land or rights in use for construction or maintenance of transport infrastructure. Where a provincial road or X traverses a piece of land, the MEC expropriates or proclaims land. Rather. So this is about where the land is not expropriated, but maybe there's an access road or whatever that is required in terms of 19B. Then the MEC to the owner, by discussion and agreement, the MEC may then expropriate the portion or the remainder of that land. We've spoken about the surveying and transfer costs. In terms,
Why not be in this and have more Q&A time?
okay, I'm almost there. I promise. To the owner, compensation that will be mutually agreed upon. An owner shall not be been compensated. They can't be compensated twice for the same reason. In closing, so that I give we refer to as a director, but our COO, a chance to address you as well. Section 28 then deals with the actual compensation. I've spoken about it. So simply put, there is an offer made to the owner. The owner has a right to respond with what they deem is the value of the property, including the cost of any modifications or improvements. And then, that then forms a basis of further discussion to agree on what becomes the price of compensation. I think for the sake of time, I'll end it here. The rest of it just going into the detail of what the compensation process looks like. Thank you for your time. No, sorry, I just stopped for the sake of time, but I can go back. It's no problem. This one slide, okay? Okay. So in the previous slides, I'd mentioned that there's the quantum of the compensation that is agreed. So the province, through a registered and suitably qualified property evaluator, will submit an offer to the affected owner of the property. The owner of the property then is afforded a right to respond with what they deem is the value of the property, including any cost or price or quantum associated with any modifications that the owner deems is of value to be considered as part of the compensation. Over and above that, any loss financial property may incur through expropriation is also added to that cost. What this slide demonstrates, over and above what I've articulated, so there's the actual quantum of the property, there's the potential financial loss, there's compensation for modifications or improvements, and then over and above that, then Section 28.3 then also applies, right? So what this speaks of is that despite any to the contrary of this act, to the total amount of compensation, 10% of the first 100,000 of the value of the property, 5% between 100,000 and 500,000, 3%, 1% between 1 million and above. So this is over and above the actual price or that will be agreed for compensation. May I end it here? And then we'll do the Q&A. Thanks.
Is that in 19% or are we looking at 1%?
In terms of subsection D.
In terms of subsection D, is that
He's asking if it's the sum of all of the percentage.
Oh, no. So this is like a sliding scale. So the value of what's agreed for compensation, let's say it's R1 million, for argument's sake. So there'll be R1 million that's agreed as a price of expropriating the property. The owner may then say, I've made modification improvement to the tune of 100,000. Then maybe there's an agreement that then the actual expropriation cost is 1.1 million. Then if an owner can demonstrate that they are incurring financial loss through the expropriation, That also then comes in over and above that 1.1 million. And then last but not least, this then comes in to say, over and above the compensation, further to that, then if the same example, if the property is worth 1 million rand, there will be 10% of the first 100,000 of that million. Then there'll be 5% of what exceeds 100,000 to 500,000. So it's cumulative. There'll be 3%, but which then is between 500 and 1 million, and 1% which exceeds 1 million. Okay, thank you. I think I'll wait for the Q&A if there are further. Yeah, thank you. JC, I don't know, is it back to you? Or?
Okay, so they've asked me to field the questions because there may be some questions that I might know the answer to, just to speed up the process. If I can't answer, I'll obviously pass on to Sepo.
Let me just start us to Good evening. First and foremost, I had a prior meeting in Sandton and load shedding then